The whole night, like everything about it was just so satisfying that it's just relit my fire for this season. It's like, man, we are right here. This is right where the hell we wanted to be. We're going to the Rose Bowl to play Oregon. There's 3 left to get there. And it's just like, this is where we wanted to be, man. We could talk about all the rest of the crap later. Like, I'm dialed the hell in, and it looks like the team is too, bro. Sorry, Ducks. Sorry about your luck. I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship. Something stupid is coming out of his mouth. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name. Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing? The season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football. This guy is a bonehead. They love him. I question your judgment as an adult. I really do. I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it. Get us back our sleeves and say, bring me that. That's the one I want. And welcome to Juckonbucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me on Tuesday, Christmas Eve. And boy, guys, this one really snuck up on me. I'm going to blame the game. I'm going to blame the turmoil we were all going through for the last couple of weeks because I had no idea that it was so close. Until actually yesterday's show, I realized that it was tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Thanks to our buddy Dago, told me that. Did not know before. It's a good thing that my boys are a little bit older now. The youngest is 17 of the 3. So we'll be partying tonight. Merry Christmas to you guys. I appreciate you so much. Partying, eating the seafood tonight, as you do on Christmas Eve. You know how it goes. And we'll have a great time. I want to tell you, I'm going to see Mom tonight. She's probably going to tell me that, Jucky, there was this many subscribers or this many viewers, but only this many likes. Why? Why isn't anybody liking it? And I'm just going to go ahead and ask you to do that now. So I have to listen to less of that. That would be fantastic. If you could do that for your boy, so I don't got to listen to Mom be mad at me that you guys aren't liking the show. You know what I'm saying? It's just her thing. I don't know. I can't explain it. But Monday's show, we were sitting at one transfer portal guy who had joined the team and 8 guys who had left. Not a great ratio. And that was Phillip Daniels, obviously a really good looking transfer from Minnesota, offensive tackle, originally from Princeton High School in Cincinnati, went up to Minnesota for PJ Fleck and the boys. And now he's back in Ohio, a great addition. And then Monday afternoon, we got some big news as we added 3 portal players on Monday. Let's go through them. Number 1, running back CJ Donaldson out of West Virginia, 1 year of eligibility left. And the wish list at running back started with Justice Haynes from Alabama. Looks like Justice Haynes is probably going to sign with either South Carolina or Michigan. We'll see. Don't care. Quentin Joyner was number 2 on that list. He came in for a visit. Kid out of USC, originally from Texas. Really good looking back out of high school, high rated 4-star, as was Haynes. And he was averaging 7.4 yards a carry out at USC, had a lot of tremendous runs, really looked good. I thought it was going good, but then he ended up signing with Texas Tech. Texas Tech, who has currently the number 2 transfer portal class in the country, has decided to clearly invest and go all in on this transfer portal cycle, and, is what it is. But the Buckeyes end up with CJ Donaldson. Now, CJ Donaldson, nothing like either of those two. CJ Donaldson, 6'2", 236. We're talking a moose of a man at running back. And let's take a look at his stats real quick. In 2024 and 2023, almost identical, about 160, we'll call it 7 carries average for 700, and we'll call it 50 yards, and a 4.6 yards per carry average. 11 touchdowns each year. And back in his freshman year, 8 touchdowns. So the guy's a hammerhead. He's scored plenty of touchdowns. That average yards per carry isn't tremendous. You'd like to see that over 5. But, he is who he is. He's a big guy. He's very difficult to bring down. He follows his blocks really well. He's not up to top speed very quick. He's not very shifty. He's kind of a one cut and go guy. But those guys can be tremendously effective, particularly when they're paired with a guy like James Peoples. And it looks like we're going to start the season with those 2 guys sharing the load. Now, we'll see if those freshmen coming in have a say. And the running back room currently looks like this: James Peoples and CJ Donaldson. You got the incoming freshman, Isaiah West, Bo Jackson, and speed demon Turbo Rogers. Then you got walk-on veteran TC Caffey coming back from his second year in a row being injured for the entire season. Let's hope he makes it back into that room. You never know after you've had 2 season-ending injuries. And then you got second year Sam Williams-Dixon. So that's 7 guys in that running back room that are all pretty quality guys. I would say that TC Caffey and Sam Williams-Dixon are the 6 and the 7 by a substantial margin. You got those 5 guys on the top there, and that is a pretty solid core of 5 guys. I think that one of those freshmen at some point during the season, maybe Bo, they're really, really fond of Bo, but maybe Isaiah, who I think everybody has slept on this entire cycle, is going to push Donaldson for some of those carries, because Peoples is the truth. We know that. So we'll see what happens, but great to start off the season with Donaldson, a veteran guy, a senior, an older guy, just a big mountain of a man to, let me pull up some pictures here. All right, so that's our first transfer. Transfer number 2, we got the number 1 tight end in the portal out of Purdue. This guy, Max Clare, was essentially Purdue's entire offense this year. He is a receiving tight end, 6'4", 240, from St. Xavier in Cincinnati, but he's an Indiana kid. In 2024, 51 receptions for 685 yards, 13.4 yards per reception. He had 3 catches over 40 yards this year. In the rest of the Big Ten, only one other tight end had 1 catch over 40 yards. In 4 games in 2023, he had 22 receptions for 196 yards. He's got 2 years of eligibility left, which is excellent. And this is a guy who 50 to 60% of the time, he was lined up either in the slot or out wide. So not your blocking tight end. This is a playmaking tight end. And in the tight end room then next year, we're going to have Will Kazmarek, Max, Jelani Thurman, Bennett Christian, Max LeBlanc, and the 2 incoming freshmen, Nate Roberts and Brody Lennon. So 2 Maxes. That just tripped me up for a second there. Yeah, we got 2 Maxes now. This is Max Clare. So that's an exciting one. That is an offensive weapon right there. And I would kind of put him kind of in between the Nate Roberts, Brody Lennon mold, where Nate is just he's a big old brute, but a receiving threat who can also, he's probably the most all around of these guys coming up is Nate Roberts. But Brody Lennon, an unbelievable athlete. Maybe Brody Lennon is more his speed, actually. Yeah, probably he's more like Brody Lennon. But regardless, this guy's a great ad. Number 1 tight end in the portal. Really, really happy about that one. Then we got some help where we really need it. And that is, we were talking about for a long time now, what are they going to do on the edge after you moved Edric Houston inside? Well, today they were able to land a defensive end out of Idaho State. And his name is Logan George. So an FCS player, but an FCS player that a lot of people wanted. 6'5", 260. And he started all 12 games last year at Idaho State. Made 57 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 19.5 tackles for loss. The year before, he played in 10 games and made 31 tackles. He's from Pocatello, Idaho, and he also has 2 years of eligibility left. So next year, on the edge, you've got Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson as your likely starters, Josh Mickens and Dominic Kirks. I think that Logan is going to be the number 3 guy up. And then you got the freshman, Ziggy Grady, and Epi Satanale. And that's a crew. That's a 7-man crew. You'd like to see, one more guy come in and maybe a heavy hitter. That would be great. But regardless, you've got 7 dudes to work with, all pretty capable, depending on whether or not Dominic Kirks moves inside or not. He's he looks like an interior guy. I don't really know how long he's going to last out there. But then keep in mind, we also have the option, and we don't know how likely it is, but I would say it's probably pretty likely that if CJ Hicks sticks around, he ends up in that room as well, and not in the linebacker room. So there we have it. We now have a total of 4 transfers in, 8 out. And let's take a look at the guys that have left just to refresh our memory here and keep up with things. We've lost Zen Mahalski, offensive tackle, Jaden Bonsu, safety, Aaron Noland, who signed with South Carolina today, Miles Walker, offensive tackle. So we're down 2 tackles. We've got 1 in. Devin Brown heads out. Kojo Antwi heads out. Jaden Ballard heading to Wisconsin, I heard. I haven't seen that for sure. And linebacker Gabe Powers. So a couple of favorites here. Obviously, Aaron Noland and Devin Brown got a lot of fans. Gabe Powers, I was a big fan of, and I really liked Bonsu. But boy, got to see Jalen McClain come in, the guy who passed him on the depth chart in the Tennessee game, and I don't think he was in for 2 plays before he just smacked somebody. And it was like, dude, that's a true freshman out there, a 3-star kid who just right up the depth chart, and he's out there laying the wood in a college football playoff game. I think the dude's going to be an absolute stud. So, a couple other news and notes in the portal. A couple of teams really cooking here, including Wisconsin, who has 15 transfers, and it looks like Luke Fickell is bound and determined to get this thing right. Ole Miss, surprise, surprise, 15 transfers as well. And Ole Miss, this is they're going for 3 years in a row at the number 1 or number 2 spot in the portal. All the while, Lane Kiffin continues to call out Ohio State and Ryan Day for spending money, which is really odd. But, you'd suspect nothing less for a team that cannot recruit in the top 15 than to have to go out and raid the portal every single year, like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss do. Auburn, 14. Not surprising there, the way Hugh Freeze and Auburn are spending money like they did in their recruiting class, almost getting a top 5 class. And our Big Ten rivals, Penn State with just 2. Oregon with 6. We'll pull their guys up here. They got the big tight end out of Louisville. Then they got 2 offensive tackles, Isaiah World and Alex Harkey, 2 highly rated ones. Isaiah World, the number 1. Then they took in Bear Alexander. They also got Dylan Thieneman and a cornerback, Theron Johnson. So Thieneman was the number 1 safety. Bear Alexander is ranked the number 4 defensive lineman. I wouldn't touch that cat with a 10-foot pole. If you have listened to me for any amount of time, you know how much I can't stand that guy. Talking about a guy who went to 4 different high schools, transferred from Georgia to USC. After signing with USC from the transfer portal, was going to leave again immediately in the next portal cycle because he wanted more money. Ended up staying with them and then sat out and took his red shirt. Like, I don't know why anybody would think that it would ever work with a guy like that, but Oregon seems to think it will. So good luck to them on him. Our friends up north now have 7 incoming transfers. Damon Payne and Troy Bowles, a couple of studs from Bama and Georgia. And then they got some twins from Arkansas, 2 safeties, Travis and TJ Metcalf, pretty quality players. And then they signed their quarterback yesterday out of Fresno, Mikey Keene. I'm not familiar. Offensive tackle Brady Norton, who was a guy that we were after, and he chose them. We were a little late on the offer there. And then they got the wide receiver from Indiana. Imagine that. Michigan taking in wide receivers from Indiana. That's nice. That's nice. Also some updates on the class of 2025. The class that the Buckeyes finished 5th in the 24/7 composite. Well, our buddies out west in Eugene, Oregon, had a 5-star wide receiver down in Florida who was committed by the name of Dallas Wilson, and he decided that he no longer wants to go to Oregon. So he is, the national letter of intent is not a thing anymore. He's not bound to stay there, or they let him out of it. Whatever the new thing is, it's like a Big Ten scholarship agreement, they call it. These things aren't binding anymore is the point. And he's decided that he's going to go play for Billy Napier at Florida instead of Oregon. No big deal. They're loaded in their wide receiver room. So not a huge deal on that front for them. But what it did do was change the 24/7 composite and I'll pull that up now for you. Oregon, who was ahead of Ohio State and had the #1 class in the Big Ten when it was all said and done, has now dropped below the Buckeyes. They are no longer the #1 recruiting class in 2025 in the Big Ten. The Ohio State Buckeyes recapture Big Ten supremacy. Oregon took it last year. They were going for 2 years in a row. Well, actually, they weren't in the Big Ten last year, but they beat us last year. But this year, their first year in the Big Ten, they had taken the Big Ten crown. The Buckeyes jump up and grab it back and take the #4 spot, and it's now done. It's over. There will be no more movement unless somebody else does this very rare move and gets out of their scholarship agreement with the Big Ten to go to wherever they said they were going to go to. So the Buckeyes win the recruiting war for the year. Sorry, Ducks. Sorry about your luck. It's weird, man, because Dallas, he was in that class for a long time, and he loved Oregon. There was a little bit of wavering right there at the end, and it looked like for a minute there he might stay home in Florida. But then he decided to go through with it and go to Oregon, and then change his mind after like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So, them's the breaks, man. You're really far away. I don't know what to tell you. But, love them Duck eyes around here. You guys are great. I'm not going to needle you too much. I will as we get closer to the game, but, no need to just yet because I got to deal with you every day in the chat. Now, today, I'm going to grab my buddy Dylan, and we're going to have a little conversation about that Tennessee game and about that upcoming Oregon game. But before we do, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate that so much. Thank you. And back at it again. You got Juck and Dylan coming to you on a Tuesday. What's up, Dylan?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just still soaking in the enjoyment from Saturday. Everything about that was awesome, and still riding high on that. The unfortunate reality of this day and age, that was that it's time to move on to bigger things, but still trying to enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm definitely giving myself a couple of days. It's not quite a week out from the Rose Bowl. Dylan, I'm going to the Rose Bowl, buddy.
Oh, are you really?
My first ever. I can't wait. I'm so pumped. I know you've been before. Is it everything it's cracked up to be?
No, I've never been to the Rose Bowl before.
You've not been to the Rose Bowl?
No, this is the one thing I've never done. I hope I didn't misspeak in the past in saying that, but to know this will be the first time I've ever been out there.
Yes.
This is not to start off the show talking about myself, but for everything that I've done, and I do think I've done it all. It was always except the Rose Bowl. And when I joined the beat, I didn't go out there in 2021 to cover it. That this is the first time I've been out there, so I riding on that game Saturday was, obviously, the Buckeyes themselves, but I had something personally invested in as well. I was watching them play for, right for me to go out to the Rose Bowl for the first time and check off the final box, in my life as a Buckeye fan. So that's awesome that you're going out there, and I'm excited as hell to be able to check this box off. Man, I just can't wait. I was just, leading up to the game, I was just, frankly, I was a little pessimistic about the game because I thought Ohio State would win the game, but knowing what it would cost me, I figured they'll go lose the damn game, because of course they would, because it's going to cost me a trip to, Southern California in January. So I'm excited. I'd love to hear it. Hey, if you, I don't know where you're staying and all that, we can get together on that, but let me know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Or something. So
I don't know that I would have gone if we had not played the way we did. I mean, it just got me, and I think, I did the show yesterday and just kind of opened it up for like a half an hour talking to everybody. And man, it just feels like the energy, it was like just a soul cleansing feeling. You know what I mean? Like after all that 3 weeks of just crap, even leading into that Tennessee game, it was still 50-50 talk about Tennessee and the last game, it was just great, man. It was just great. We heard about how many of them were coming into town. What did you think when you actually saw that live as you were coming in? They were just everywhere, man. And it infuriated me.
I'll be honest. I was a little internally panicked. Look, as somebody who's been on a lot of road trips and, going to new places and venues, you're really excited about seeing for the first time these quote unquote bucket list venues. Of course, the opposing fans are going to get down to the stadium early. They're going to spend their entire day around it because you just want to soak it in and try to make it the most you can, experiencing something new and something really cool if you're a college football fan. So I wasn't surprised when I drove to the stadium. And of course, our parking garage is, right across the street. And, it was just mainly Tennessee fans, that I saw Tennessee Orange driving down High Street. So I wasn't really surprised by that a ton. But as I was walking to the stadium, the press entrance is on the other side of the stadium, on the west side of the stadium. So I have to walk around the stadium, and I was a little bit surprised how just dead it was, other than Tennessee fans tailgating in the immediate parking lots outside the stadium. But again, I thought, okay, this is nothing new to Ohio State. At that point, I got down there earlier than usual, so it was 3:00. So, I wasn't overly surprised by it, but was still a little surprised, is when they let fans in. I believe it's 2 hours before kickoff when they open the gates.
Yeah.
Fans, as that stadium started to slowly fill up a little bit, maybe the first 30, 40 minutes of stands or the fans being able to come in, I started to have a little internal panic that this whole Neyland North invasion was a real thing. Like, it was actually going to be maybe worse than I thought. And I already thought coming in that it was going to be, I said I would expect 30,000 people, 30,000 Vols fans. And I started to wonder to myself if I undersold that number. Now, as it filled in, once again, those Vols fans got in the stadium as quick as they could because they wanted to take it all in, same as anybody else would if Buckeye fans were going down to Neyland or whatever stadium. Buckeye fans that went out to Autzen, I'm sure, did the same thing. And as it started to fill up more closer to game time, it became more apparent that 30,000 was probably the number that I would put it at. Obviously, give or take, a few thousand. I don't know, and certainly we'll never know the real number on that. But I would say it was solid 30,000. But it was jarring. It was jarring for somebody who's been in that stadium, for so many games and big moments and, games against great fan bases. It was jarring to see just how many Tennessee fans were in there. And as being down in the field, every time a position group would run out for Tennessee and they started playing Rocky Top, and it was loud down there. It was loud down there. And I started to wonder just how real this invasion was. By kickoff, look, Buckeye fans showed up and showed out. That environment was awesome. So any talk of this whole, taking over the stadium, that was all bullshit. That wasn't a thing. But credit to Tennessee fans, because it was something I'd never seen before in Ohio Stadium, or never thought I would see that many Tennessee fans there.
I never thought I'd see it either, and it just burned inside of me being down there. And I feel like that was the feeling that a whole lot of Buckeye fans had walking in, just everything. It was like, this cannot be happening, man. This is Ohio State. And it pissed me off, that, I was mad at other Buckeye fans. Like, I was just furious. Like, everything was, and it came out, with everybody, and the team cooperated. And I don't feel like I've been involved or a part of. I felt like I was a part of it in a win that was quite so satisfying. And geez, man, it's been a long time, decades. I'd have to sit down and think about it, but the whole night, like, everything about it was just so satisfying that it's just relit my fire for this season. It's like, man, we are right here. This is right where the hell we wanted to be. We're going to the Rose Bowl to play Oregon. There's 3 left to get there. And it's just like, this is where we wanted to be, man. We could talk about all the rest of the crap later. Like, I'm dialed the hell in, and it looks like the team is too, bro.
I don't know how that wouldn't be a response to what we saw on Saturday night, and just the outpouring of emotion that whole night was. Going back to the environment real quick, I thought that, the amount of Tennessee fans that showed up and what they were bringing as far as the energy they brought to the stadium really brought out the best in the Buckeye fans who showed up. And I want to make no mistake about this. People might not like hearing it. I still think it was a stain on the Buckeye fan base to see that many Tennessee fans in the Horseshoe on Saturday, even though it wasn't this takeover that, Tennessee fans were selling it to be. And it sure as hell wasn't the 40,000 people that Herb Street said on the broadcast or anything like that. But even still, to see that many Tennessee fans in there, I thought was a little bit embarrassing for the Ohio State fan base. Fortunately for, part of this fan base, Ohio State went out and kind of diminished the impact of that, those Tennessee fans being there, because had Tennessee won that football game, how loud it would have been in that stadium in the second half as the minutes dwindled down, as it became clear Tennessee was going to win, as Ohio State fans left or were quiet and the Tennessee fans got louder, it would have been a very, very bad look, for the fan base and for the program. Didn't matter. So I do want to say that I thought that was a little bit embarrassing. But with that being said, I thought for the Buckeye fans that were there, the Tennessee fans brought out the best in Ohio State fans, and that atmosphere was just juice as a result. It felt like a competition, and I know you said as much, I believe, on Saturday, that at some point just became a pride thing, to drown out Tennessee fans and make sure that there was no chance that they were going to take over that stadium, and Ohio State fans showed up in a big way as a result, and that's awesome. But
I'll be honest, Dylan,
yeah,
that's, to your point, like saying you feel like it was a stain on Buckeye fans, that is what pushed me to go.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I was so irritated leading into that game. I wouldn't have gone if I didn't see this coming like that,
Yeah.
because that was my first thought. Like, if we let all these people come in there, like, I got to get my butt down there. And I just felt like I had to, right? Because if you're going to talk the talk, you need to back it up. You know what I mean? So I went down there just for that reason. Not just for that, but that kind of just pushed me over the edge. Like, all right, we're going down.
And look, I understand, in general, I'm not speaking to, let me preface this by saying, who gives a shit what I think anyways? I'm just expressing my opinions. That's what we do here. So if anybody's offended by it, sorry, I'm not telling anybody, what they should or should do. But I understand, the whole money aspect of things. I get that. But when it became, to me, kind of when I became of the mindset that this was kind of a stand on Ohio State fans, as those ticket prices continued to drop, I saw countless people, Tennessee fans on Twitter, like make decisions on Friday night. They're like, screw it. They bought tickets. We're driving to Columbus tomorrow.
They were $70 to get in, bro.
Right. I know there were cases. People that I saw on Twitter of Tennessee fans who made a decision on Saturday morning, given the prices, that screw it. We bought tickets. Let's start heading to Columbus. In general, I always understand it's harder than ever to go to games. It's such an event. It's an all day thing. The prices of it, I get all that. But when it became very clear that Tennessee fans weren't kidding about, just flooding the horseshoe with Tennessee orange, and with the ticket prices, for people to sell season tickets, sell their tickets, and B, if you had the means to do it otherwise and decided not to be in that stadium for the prices and not just the prices, but in pride and defending the stadium and all that, but what you were going to see. I mean, you're going to see the first ever college football playoff game in Ohio Stadium. Like, I just didn't really understand it anymore. And look, again, for as big a fan base, there's plenty of other ones who, again, like yourself, got to the stadium and made that such an awesome atmosphere, for the Buckeyes, and certainly helped carry that team on that night. But
it's disappointing. But when we talk about talk about your buddy Kirk, right? I mean, he brought it up during.
He ain't my buddy anymore. I'm all the way out. All the way out.
Okay, he's all the way out now after that one. Yeah. So he brings it up, says the lunatic fringe has gone from 8 to 12% to 15 to 20. And I just found it so unbelievable that he's calling the people that are out on Ryan Day the lunatic fringe while he's looking at that at Ohio Stadium, acknowledging this is the most crazy thing he's ever seen in Ohio Stadium. Like, those two things don't jive, buddy. Clearly, this is a big issue with a large chunk of the fan base, because you're seeing $70 tickets and 30,000 opposing fans in the shoe right in front of your nose.
The arrogance with which he spoke, I'll say not even to, but at Ohio State fans on Saturday night was the most unbecoming thing I've ever seen from a guy of his stature and his platform. Not to mention the fact that he was standing in Ohio Stadium calling a game in which he knew, which obviously was by design, he knew what he was doing. The opportunity to speak directly at Ohio State fans, and it was just, I don't need to say any more than that. I know everybody's heard all the clips and they had their thoughts, and rightfully so. But it was just that whole situation was just wild, and continues to be weirder and weirder with Kirk Herbstreit. And frankly, that's a whole conversation, and maybe we can dive into that some other time, because I don't want to take up too much time, because there's a lot to talk about the game, and I don't want to give the guy the time. But there are a lot of aspects of that which is I just don't understand what he's trying to achieve or what he's hoping to achieve, or I guess I know what he's trying to achieve, but to try to sell it as anything else is really just insulting the intelligence of the people who are listening to him. But
Well,
going
that
back
was
to
his pivot. I
yeah,
bet what he had was his he was waiting for Tennessee to take a lead,
yeah,
fans to boo. Like
yeah.
he had that one written. This was his pivot.
The saddest thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about Kirk Herbstreit tonight, but when you joked, your guy, and obviously the last time I talked to you, I just shared the story about, was one of my favorite conversations I've ever had in this, doing this job. And it was when I first got started. So, I really didn't, he didn't have to give me the time of day. And he was the nicest guy. What I took from that and why I've always defended Kirk Herbstreit, and certainly, I can acknowledge, I think most people can acknowledge, unless you are one of the true lunatic, there is a lunatic fringe of this fan base.
Sure.
I don't think there's any denying that. The audacity he had to suggest that lunatic fringe has grown simply because people are fed up and pissed off about losing, to Michigan 4 times in a row. That was the issue. But there's a lunatic fringe. The reason I always defended Kirk Herbstreit and never really understood some of the disrespect and the hate he got within this fan base was because, look, I promise you that nobody loves Ohio State more than Kirk Herbstreit. Nobody. I mean, he loves that program. Obviously, he played there, captain, his dad's captain. We know all those things. He genuinely loves Ohio State, but you'll never convince me otherwise. I'll go to my grave just absolutely convinced that he was hoping that situation that he predicted would play out, that Ohio State would fall behind in that game, that they would struggle, and the boo birds would come out. And that's what his vendetta against Ohio State fans is starting to influence, the very thing that he loved more than anything, which is the program. Some of these things that he's saying isn't hurting. They're not hurting Ohio State fans. Ohio State fans already feel how they feel about Kirk Herbstreit and already think what they think about Kirk Herbstreit. Some of the things he says, are hurting the program. They're making the program look bad. And that's why I would hope, I don't know how that relationship with him or Ryan Day or anybody in the Woody is, but I would hope that people inside the program start to kind of feel like, hey, no, stay on that side. You're not one of us anymore, buddy. We don't want that, because some of the things he's saying make the program look bad, not the fan base, make the program look bad. And at the end of the day, we're just fans, so it doesn't really matter all that much anyways. But when you're starting to say things and suggest things and allude to things that make the program look bad, you're hurting the one thing that you love more than anything. So your vendetta is getting in the way of your love for Ohio State. And I don't understand that at all. And that's the saddest thing about it, and why I say, to hell with you, Kirk Herbstreit. When you're starting to put your vendetta with the fan base over the program itself, then, how do you sit there and call yourself a Buckeye anymore? So
It's incredibly odd, Dylan. It's incredibly odd. And I was talking about the show earlier today. I really think that the situation that Ryan Day found himself in heading into this game was maybe the single oddest situation a coach has ever found himself in a big time program. And he did it, man. He pulled it off. The comeback of all comebacks, from maybe the worst game of his career, definitely the worst game of his career, to one of his best in the game after. They went for broke. They were aggressive. They were nasty. The offensive line rotation, let's start there. It worked. They were going against what I think is the best defensive front in the SEC. Those dudes roll 8 deep with starter material and 12 deep with quality. And they're big and they're nasty. There's some 340 pounders. And Luke Montgomery came in and was smashing dudes. Austin Tegra had a couple moments, rebounded in the second half. Fryer pumped up, amped up his last game at the shoe. Man, those guys made me proud, dude. I just felt so good for those guys.
Yeah, without question, there were some tough reps in there from some of those guards. I can think of a couple off the top of my head, from Luke, from Tegra, and from Austin. Some tough reps in there, which you're going to have, obviously, and you're going to be under a microscope given, all the talk that's been around those 3 names and those 2 positions in particular. But by and large, I don't think I could have scripted those 3 guys to play any better than they did, and obviously, as a whole, the offensive line to play any better. And you look at Ohio State's success there, and look at the game plan. The offensive staff did a lot to really help those guys out as well, as they said they would, and as they knew, they acknowledged they needed to. But those guys really answered the bell, and it all started there, right? If however you thought this game was going to go, or however you wanted to predict it, it started there. Anybody, whether you, me, or nationally, people have talked about that matchup with Tennessee's talented and deep defensive line and, an Ohio State offensive line that frankly, how could you have a lot of faith in them? Not to say that, they couldn't, hold their own, but, how could you say you have faith in them or, be overly confident in that? They answered the bell in the biggest way. It gives you hope again. I feel like we're, not in the same exact fashion, but I almost feel like we're right back to where we were after that Penn State game. At least, for me personally, I can only speak to myself. As your listeners know, as I heard about going into that game, I questioned Ohio State's ability to go win that Penn State game because, frankly, I didn't know how their offensive line would give them a chance to. And boy, did they ever answer the bell in a big way. Going into this game, once again, I wondered. Now, I did pick Ohio State to win the game. I thought they were going to win the game. We can get into some of that in a little bit, but I did doubt myself. I did wonder, how Ohio State would hold up along the offensive line enough to go in that game, and they did in a big way. And it gives you confidence going forward, just like that Penn State game did. I told you after the Nebraska game that I wondered if I didn't just watch a team that can't win a national championship anymore because of the issues they have in the offensive line and whether they could overcome it. And then after that Penn State game, I was like, oh, okay, well, they might have been able to patch us up well enough to that they could still go do that. And now I'm right back today saying like they're only going to get better as they continue to get more confidence, just more reps in general, especially for a guy like Luke Montgomery who has very little to banked and playing together. They're only going to get a little bit better as well. And now maybe that offensive line is good enough, especially when you match it with what we saw offensively in terms of how aggressive they were, that they will be just fine offensively. And I believe that. And so. It was just I want to say it was an A+ performance in terms of grading their actual play, but just the magnitude of the spots they were in and how imperative it was that they play well to win the game. It was an A+ effort.
Yeah, for the magnitude, the circumstances, the opponent, the guys across from him, all the talk leading up about that, excellent defensive line. When you roll all that together, fantastic. And you throw the coaching in there too, Chip, with the quick outs to the running backs and everything, like all that combined, like it was just excellent for those guys. They put them in the best situation to succeed. And they answered the bell. And when we look at it, funny you say like it, you doubted yourself. So I was on this Miami show on Tuesday, and they were I don't want to say Buckeye haters, but a lot of the people who were watching were,
Sure.
And they were asking questions like, how do you think Ohio State's offensive line is possibly going to block them? And, I said I thought Chip would do a lot of what he did, but, ultimately my answer was like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I just got faith. I don't really know. And I hope they do.
I'll add to this that I never really questioned Ohio State's ability to hold up in pass protection. I didn't really feel bad about that.
I didn't either.
My questions were, how was this offensive line going to rally enough to be able to run the ball with any type of success that would allow them to do what they want to do off of that and be the offense that we came to know, for a while there, which also led me to wonder, how different will this really be in terms of approach from the Ohio State coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff. If they can't run the football, are they going to be willing to just, throw caution to the wind and air it out and try to go win that game in whatever fashion they want to? Now, obviously, as it turns out, they didn't need to, but that was my question. That was my doubt in the game was, assuming they can't go run the ball with any type of success, which I questioned that they could, would the coaching staff be willing to still do whatever they needed to do to give their offense a chance to move the ball, put points up, and ultimately win the game? It was just it was a resounding performance from those guys, and certainly gives you a ton of confidence going back to what you said a little bit ago. Like, I don't know how anybody, I don't want to say I don't know how, just knowing the fan base, but I would imagine that by and large, people are very reinvigorated by that. Some may not even want to be reinvigorated, but can't help themselves because I don't know how. And you mentioned this the last show we did. Some of these people who maybe say that they wanted Ohio State to lose, and we'll see how that is when you see those scarlet uniforms running out on the field on Saturday and the juices are flowing, and certainly Ohio State gets off to a big lead. I wonder how they felt then, but after that game, after everything that was said, just the amount of pride that was on the line for the Ohio State program and by extension the fan base. I don't know how anybody wouldn't be reinvigorated by that, knowing now you're going to the Rose Bowl. You're going to the Granddaddy, just an iconic setting, an iconic matchup. You're traditional for everybody who grew up watching the game, a traditional Big Ten, Pac-12 matchup, a team that you've already seen once, and Ohio State is every bit as good at as. And in my opinion, if Ohio State goes and wins that football game, frankly, I think whoever wins that football game is going to go win a national title. And obviously that you still have to go do it. But, I believe Ohio State's 60 minutes of good football and a win away from, I would say they're going to go win a national title. So how are you not excited by that? I don't know. If you're not, that's your prerogative, but I don't know how you're not excited by that.
I mean, that's another, it's kind of a silly argument. Somebody asked me today, does Ryan Day redeem himself if he wins a national championship? And to me, like, it's two separate things.
Absolutely.
But I'll say this, like, if you were out on Ryan Day or wanted him fired, and you think now that if he wins a national championship, you'll still be out on him, wait till you actually see that happen. Yeah. I don't think you're going to feel that way anymore, because you're going to have seen at that point a game that we just saw in Tennessee, then another one in Oregon, then another one in Texas, then another one in the national championship. And having seen those games, that builds, and he's going to buy you back if that happens. So there's no doubt about that.
I would add to that. And look, once again, I don't come on here to offend anybody. I'll always speak what I believe is true, and people will disagree with that. I've been wrong plenty of times. I'll be wrong plenty of times again. I'm more than happy to hear about it when I'm wrong. But I'll add to that. If Ohio State went and won a national title, if they beat Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and then say Georgia in the national championship game to win a national title, I understand what the Michigan game means as well as anybody.
Oh yeah,
I was raised in it as much as anybody. Anybody else in this fan base or in the Woody for that matter. So I understand what the game means. But if you go reel off those 4 games, in what world would there be any grounds to fire a head coach after that for beating those 4 teams in succession to win a national title? It would be indefensible to try to make an argument to say this guy needs to go because he got beat by Michigan again, which again, just to asinine, I can't fathom that loss. Never will be able to. You beat those 4 teams and win a national title. I just couldn't even. You couldn't humor me with the take on firing him after that. So
no, if that were to happen, Dylan, he's now quite literally the second best active coach in the game.
Yeah.
Like, there's no debate. Dabo's washed. He's got his 2, but he's washed. He slots right in behind Kirby with his resume in 6 years with a national championship, 2 national championship game appearances, and 1 de facto national championship game against Georgia where he was 1 point away. Like, it's no debate. You got that in 6 years. You're number 2 in the game right now.
And with the most historic run, by the way, that we've ever seen.
Exactly. And that on top of it. Like,
yeah.
Dude, there's a fly in here. I'm going to go bananas. Anyway. But no, I mean, like you say, like, this game against Oregon, it's going to be one heck of a bet. I want to talk a little more about Tennessee for
I agree.
But with Oregon, I do agree that these are the 2 best teams. Somehow Texas is the favorite. I suppose when you factor in the route they've got to go, they've got Arizona State, and so you probably wouldn't make Ohio State or Oregon the favorite this week as they're playing each other.
If Texas had to play Oregon or Ohio State next week,
right?
And the other one was playing Arizona State, that team would be the favorite to go win a national title.
Right on. But I don't think Texas. But what I was looking at all the teams remaining, and when we talk about that Tennessee defensive line, something everybody left has in common, aside from Arizona State and Boise State, excellent defensive lines. Yep. They all got them. In fact, I think they're like the 6th best in the country. If you bring in Ole Miss into the equation, maybe one other out there, but they all got that in common. And the Buckeyes are going to need to repeat this performance against Oregon, that offensive line, against Texas, excellent defensive line, and potentially against Georgia or Penn State or Notre Dame, any of which over there on that side of the bracket also have great defensive lines. So this right here this is it. This is everything, this offensive line, and it's going to come right back to where we started with our talks in the offseason, our talks in the preseason, and we saw that thing go from Okay, we think this is actually going to be a good offensive line, to, whoa, it's a great offensive line, to a decimated offensive line. Where's the depth? And boy, that Nebraska game, and now potentially back up. I mean, it's set up to be the most amazing season storyline we've seen since 2014, not in Ohio State, but in all of college football. So that's got me jazzed. Everything's got me jazzed. Will Howard was ridiculous. And I have been, both of us, talking all year about how slow they've been running this damn offense. And I just could not grasp why. I was all excited for Chip Kelly to come pick up the pace of play a little bit. Always been his calling card. I'm not talking about going breakneck speed, but we had dipped down from, in 2019, Ryan Day was running 75 offensive plays a game to 61 plays a game last year. And Chip had about 65. I'm like, all right, let's get this up a little bit. And sure enough, we dropped down one more play. And to deliberately run this offense so slow, it almost feels like this is the strategy of every team that's overmatched we've ever heard, right?
Yeah.
Take your time, use all the clock, huddle, hold the ball, but keep the ball away from their offense. I never understood why in the world, with all the weapons you've got, that you've spent all these resources, time, and effort to recruit and get these guys, maximize the number of times they get to touch the ball throughout the game, because that's your biggest advantage. And I was just hoping that is the way they would come out against Tennessee. Said it all week, and I thought that they were gonna, because he kept saying over and over again, maximize your strengths and minimize your deficiencies. It was the buzzword of the week, the buzz phrase of the week. And sure as shit, man. Sorry. Sure as heck, he comes out, no huddle right off the rip. And I grabbed my son. I start shaking him. I said, they're doing it. They're doing it. And that first drive, that touchdown pass by Will, I mean, an all-timer, right? Just an all-timer. He dropped two of them right in the bucket like that. He was so good. That first pass, though, got me nervous to Emeka, though. It was right behind him, like, oh, no. But now he recovered right off the rip. He was so good all night, dude. 82% completion percentage, slinging it around. And every time he's played like that, been allowed to play like that, he has been so good. Which is another thing that's just bewildering me. And I've just, talked to the people who like Ryan Day and want him to stay, that this is proof to them that's why, guys. That's why. People on the other side, this is proof to them. That's why. You had this all year. Why would you screw around and not just run this all year when you had it? But what did you think, man? Will was amazing.
Will was fantastic, without a doubt. Look, when Will's dialed, he's all the way dialed in. Will looks fantastic when he's just firing on all cylinders. Saturday night was another one of those. The number of times did he complete 80% of his passes? I'm trying to remember. 82. Which was that the fourth or fifth time he's done that this year? Completed at least 80%. I want to say the fourth.
So I think the record was 6, and he broke the record earlier.
Okay, I can't remember. But I don't care I don't even care about the competition. Obviously, Saturday's competition was really good, but I don't even care what the competition is. That's a really hard thing to do. And so again, when he's locked in, I mean, it's a sight to behold. Now, I understand that he doesn't have the biggest arm and the ability to drive the ball down the field. The pass to Emeka that Emeka made a really good play on, which was a really big play in the game, because it was a little underthrown, and frankly it should have gone for 6. But fine, whatever. Emeka comes in, but if he doesn't and that drive ends up stalling and we punt the ball, again, you never know how the game goes after that. But so I understand that he doesn't have the biggest arm to be able to drive the ball down the field. Will Howard's not a perfect quarterback. If he was, he wouldn't have been at Kansas State for 5. Well, he wouldn't be in college football right now still.
Right.
He would already be in the league. So, but in general, when he's dialed, man, it looks really good, and he's been dialed a lot this year. I want Ryan Day, and talking about coming out and running tempo and things of that nature. Leading up to this game, obviously people were piling on Ryan Day for a lot of different reasons. And I made the comment, and I believed it then, and certainly it played out again now. Ryan Day has a pretty strong track record in these types of games. He had a
Mhm.
strong track record going into this game, and this is another feather in his cap in that regard. Now, it only underscores just how frustrating some of the losses are. That it takes moments like this for them to to rally. But Ryan has a pretty good track record in this. You think back to the 2020 Clemson game in that Sugar Bowl, all the disrespect and all the talk about the schedule they played and the lack of number of games, and Big Ten changing things around to not make sure, but to put Ohio State in the Big Ten title game and all these things. Clemson's comments about rankings and things of that nature. Ryan Day had that team absolutely ready to run through a brick wall and just poured out a ton of frustration on Clemson that night and beat the hell out of them. You saw the same thing leading up to the Georgia game. Everybody knew it. It's still the standard for which we talk about Ryan Day now. That Ryan Day that we saw leading up to Georgia and the Ryan Day that coached that Georgia game. Where's that Ryan Day at? We talked about it this year, a few times. We talked about it in the preseason leading up to that, about whether Ryan Day was different this year. So Ryan Day had a little bit of a track record in these types of games, and we saw it again. Again, backs against the wall. He's going to get his team ready to play as hard as they possibly can, and they're going to go down swinging. They will throw caution to the wind with that regard. So, kudos to Ryan Day for that. And again, I think people can maybe start to put to bed this notion that, regardless, when push comes to shove, Ryan Day is going to be who Ryan Day. That's not true. We've seen Ryan Day change when he has to. Now, again, I don't understand why it takes these moments when their backs are up against the wall for him to do this, or for this team to be like this. But for what it's worth, I was very confident going into this game because of that, because I thought Ryan Day would have them ready to play in that regard, because he does have a track record of doing that. But going back to Will Howard and talking about Will Howard, in Tennessee's two losses, they got torched in the secondary. I know McCoy is a really good cornerback, but overall, there were signs there that secondary could be had. Now, I will never understand Tennessee's willingness to put their corners out on islands against Ohio State's receivers and just take their chances there. You could have, leading into this game, you could ask me 100 times how I thought this game would go or what I thought might be important or, big matchups. And I never would thought that Tennessee would just say, like, we're going to put those guys on an island because we think they can hold up against Ohio State's receivers. Obviously, they didn't. But with that being said, Will has to make those throws, and he threw some beautiful balls that there wasn't a ton of separation there, and certainly receivers made some plays as well. So just a tremendous performance by Will, but I also thought it was just a great performance by the receivers, and we just come to expect this, so we don't really talk about that a lot. But there was a couple of catches that were helped define that game that didn't have to be made. Like, you wouldn't bat an eye at it really and say, like, how do you not catch that ball? We probably would have put a little more blame on Will Howard, and but those guys made those plays, and I think that's worth mentioning because, again, I think we fall in this lull of course they made those plays because that's who they are. That's Ohio State receivers for you. So
it's a really good point. It is, because you look at the other side, and I saw some opportunities that their receivers could have made excellent catches and helped Nico out. They couldn't do it. But the Buckeye receivers always seem to come up with those balls. And they're always ready. Even Carnell, who wasn't involved much at all when it was his time, it was perfect. His route was perfect. His catch was perfect. Foot placement was perfect. Everything was perfect. They're like machines. But one of the most satisfying quarters of football we've ever seen, that first quarter.
Yeah.
But as you head into the second quarter and things start rolling, you get the ridiculous pass interference, uncalled pass interference that turns into the interception, which I think that it's just something we are going to have to get used to when it comes to Jeremiah.
Yeah.
They're not going to give him the benefit of the doubt ever, because he's bigger and stronger. It's like Fallon, Shaq, or LeBron.
Bingo.
Just the way it goes with a dude like that. And then they kick a field goal. They score a touchdown. It's 21-10. Buckeyes got an opportunity after a good Trey run to maybe get into field goal range. And with 5 seconds left, they take a timeout and end up lining up and kicking. I think was it a 56-yarder? Is that what it was?
55 or 56. I can't remember the exact number.
Okay. So that sucker lands in the middle of the end zone. Tennessee doesn't have a guy back to return that thing, which was mind-boggling to me, why they weren't trying to return that. What did you think of that sequence of events? And then I'm going to take you into your post game press conference question, which was about the responding and coming out of halftime.
Well, I mean, in real time, I didn't really understand the value at all of trying to do anything with that drive, with the risk. Like very clearly, momentum had shifted a little bit in that game. You alluded to the question I asked Ryan, but without getting into it totally, it felt like Ohio State let Tennessee off the hook a little bit. Now, officiating was a massive, massive part of that. For as bad as the pass interference or no pass interference call was, the roughing the passer thing was one of the most difficult penalties I've ever imagined. With that call, and of course Kirk Herbstreit on the broadcast trying to find every reason to justify the call. With things that don't even exist in college football.
What did he say?
If I remember correctly, he alluded to the idea of driving a quarterback into the ground, which has never
That's
been
not a
called.
college football rule.
Exactly. And I forget who's the rules official on ES. Is it Bill Amanier?
Yeah.
And he made that same comment that he's never seen that, called in college football because it doesn't exist. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
And also, if you go back and look at the replay, frankly, Kenyatta didn't even really drive him into the ground. He was kind of turning anyways and still landed on him a little bit, but it wasn't even that. And, oh, by the way, Nico was still in the process of getting rid of the football when the hit happened anyway. So just that was crazy. And look, that, for a little bit between the end of the half of football and then, the 20 minutes of halftime, it felt like that call was, potentially a game defining call because it almost changed everything. It was almost one of those plays. I text my dad, after Tennessee paid that off with the touchdown to cut it to 11, I text my dad and said, that's one of those plays. That's one of those, momentum shifts that you point back to at the end of the game and say it all changed at that moment. And for a little bit, it did all change in that moment. And obviously, we were left to see what happened at the start of the second half. And we know how it went. But so anyways, all that momentum with Tennessee, and the game had shifted, and I just didn't see any value really whatsoever. Knowing what you have, or at least what I think they have in Jaden Fielding, the conditions and the coldness of it, I didn't really see the value in trying to do anything there and potentially risk maybe starting or spurring on that avalanche for Tennessee that seemed like at the time it was already starting to kind of inch forward a little bit. Now they did what they did and they got into field goal range. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen anything. I could be wrong. I haven't seen anything to suggest that like Jaden Fielding has 55 in him, on a warm day in September. And that's not a knock on Jaden Fielding. That's a hell of a kick there. That's a hell of a kick, to settle for that in, mid-December. Man, that's tough. I even, I'll be honest. I looked to the guy sitting to my right in the press box and said, "This won't make it halfway up the S in Ohio State in the end zone." And that's exactly where the son of a bitch landed. Sorry, pardon my language. So that's where
it was right in front of me. It was right in front of me. But to your point, I have seen myself with mine own eyes him make a 62 and a 58-yarder in practice conditions with a rush, not just in warmups.
Right, sure.
So he's definitely got that leg. But in those conditions,
if they firmly believe, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say I've seen Jaden Fielding kick, a ton of footballs outside of obviously the ones that we all see during games and warmups and things. But if they firmly believe that he had 55 in him in those conditions, then that changes the whole conversation. Just like in the NFL, you get the ball back with any amount of time in the NFL and timeouts, whatever the case may be. You're trying to get points there, and those are big points at the end of halves. When you have those NFL kickers who can, who at this point in the NFL, 50 plus is just anything inside of 60. For the most part, you expect guys are going to have plenty of leg to go get that. So if they really believe that they had that in Jaden Fielding, then that changes my opinion on trying to go get points there. But my mindset was when they were trying to is that like, well, to even make this a reasonable make for him, they have to get to probably the 33-yard line at worst, make it a 50-yarder and probably inside of that. And it just didn't seem like there was any reason to risk what it would take to do that and potentially spur on this momentum shift that Tennessee already had started. So
Yeah.
Now, I do understand somebody did, bring up this point, and I get it to some degree. Even just moving the football a little bit, maybe kind of changed a little bit of momentum as well. And I don't know that maybe it was just, as a reminder that Ohio State could still move the ball, the way they wanted to, almost at
Yeah,
will.
that matters.
And if there was some aspect of that, but to that, I would still say I hardly, think that the coaching staff was putting the ball in harm's way for that reason alone. I think that the only reason they do that is because they thought that they could go get those points. And again, they obviously know a hell of a lot more about Jaden Fielding than I do, so they must know something about Jaden that I don't. And you mentioned that you've seen that. However, you've seen that. So if that's true, then it makes a lot of sense for me. But certainly in the moment, I didn't think that there was any conceivable way they were going to get a realistic field goal off there and to put the ball in harm's way. It just didn't make
Well,
a lot of
let's listen to your question and what Ryan Day had to say.
You dominated, so this has got to continue. This has got to build momentum, going into this next game.
Over to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Ryan, you dominated the first half, but then you look up at the scoreboard heading into halftime, and you're only up 11. Did you feel like maybe you let them off the hook a little bit? And what was that conversation like at halftime, knowing that you did dominate that half, albeit only an 11-point margin?
Yeah, that's why we knew coming out in the second half we had to win the next 4 to 5 minutes, and we did, and that really helped because you're right. You can feel that way a little bit, but. I say to them all the time, coming in halftime, you're either going to be up, down, or it's going to be tied. And so now we have to go win the next 5 minutes of the game, 4 minutes of the game. And, they deferred, so they got the ball. So we had to get that stop. We did. And then we went down and scored, and that made a huge difference. But yeah, I tell the guys all the time that, you're in games like this, you got to have poise because there's ups and downs, and you can't get caught up in that. But yeah, there was a point there we have a chance to go up 28-0, and we threw the interception. Great play, and I like the call. I like how aggressive we were because that's part of it. When you're going to call the game aggressively, something like this happens. You have to be willing to work, live with it. But yeah, you had a chance to score right there and go 28-0, and the game's pretty much in hand at that point. But they fought their way back in. But they're a good team. This is a very good SEC team that came up here and.
I just want to say, when he says there towards the end there about living with the interception, you're going to call the game aggressively. You got to live with things that happen. I like the call. I often wonder, why does it have to be all or nothing? You know what I mean? It seems like he has this mindset. Okay, today we're going to be aggressive. Right. Other days we're not going to do any of it, totally shut down. I don't understand why it's got to be all or nothing. It doesn't make any sense.
I didn't really view the play call as anything overly aggressive anyways. I think it was, they were at the 20-yard line, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Taking a shot at the end zone on first down from the 20-yard line is not anything crazy. That's not that's not throwing the kitchen sink at Tennessee. They took a shot, and you had a good favorable matchup, with Jeremiah, you think, and the ball needs to probably be thrown just a little bit, better. I can't remember the throw off the top of my head where it was. Was it a little bit lower towards the defender who was trailing Jeremiah? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head now. Anyways.
Yeah, I can't recall.
Anyway, so maybe it wasn't a bad. I can't remember. But I didn't think it was anything overly aggressive, anyways. But I do agree with you that I don't know why. You need to go, balls to the wall, throw caution to the wind one day, and the next day, go back to what's more of your methodical approach that you have to your offensive game plan. So yeah, I'm not sure now. Whatever the case may be, going out to Pasadena, I hope that if that's what they, if that's the way it is, I hope they certainly, as everybody does, err towards just being overly aggressive and just, doing whatever you have to do, no apologies and not worried about the consequences as they talked about.
I don't know how you could possibly go back to playing the Nebraska style, Michigan style after that. And in the first Oregon game, which they were looked a lot more like this.
Yeah.
So the two, I guess, really, most aggressive and kind of best. Maybe would you say Oregon was? Well, that was the only other game Will had 300 yards in his career. Was the Oregon game?
Yeah, he was fantastic in that game. We talked about it. Obviously, everybody's going to remember the play at the end that was a mistake on his part. But just evaluating his entire performance in that game, he was fantastic. He gave Ohio State a chance to win that game. Frankly, they don't have a chance to win that game if Will Howard's not as good as he was in that game. So yeah.
Yeah, so this has got to be the recipe going forward, man. It's got to be. If it's not, boy, heaven help him. You know what I mean? Like, geez. Speaking of that, I did say that yesterday or last time we talked regarding the defensive line rotation. If they're gassed and it didn't even seem to matter, but they did rotate. But gosh, Dylan, the total defensive effort, just ridiculous. There was never a point in that second half where it ever felt like Tennessee had a chance to mount any kind of comeback. Like even when it was 28-10, it was like, yeah, they're just done. This is over. They're not going to score. And then they didn't until a garbage time touchdown against backups. But the defense was just amazing. It's hard to even single anybody out individually because they were all so good.
Yeah, no, they were certainly flying around. It was a lot of fun to watch them. It's been a lot of fun to watch them for a while now. They're playing as well as I've seen an Ohio State defense play collectively in a while.
Yeah,
week after week after week. One thing I'll say, and again, I went back and forth on who I thought would win the football game, but I always kept coming back to leaning towards Ohio State's going to go win the football game. And one of the biggest reasons I thought they would do that. And I was talking to, I left the stadium with Jim Lachey on Saturday night, and I was talking to him, and we were talking about Ohio State's offensive line performance and how well they played. And I made this comment as well. Leading up to this game, I'd say at every turn to people who asked me, how I thought the game would go is, so much talks, being made about Ohio State's offensive line, but people are kind of glossing over some of the holes that the Tennessee offensive line had. They gave up 9 sacks combined in their 2 losses. Like they could be had. They could be had. Ohio State, again, I was shocked at the dominant nature with which Ohio State won that football game. But some of the reasons Ohio State dominated that football game were not a surprise to me, and you could see coming if you were really paying attention to who Tennessee was this year. And that offensive line was one of them. Again, 9 sacks in their 2 losses. So Ohio State was kind of primed to have a big day along the defensive line, and they sure as hell did. I mean, they delivered in a big way. And you're right about singling one performance out. I mean, just all across the board, there were stars all over the field. Everybody was getting involved. I mean, the one name I don't think I really heard at all, which is a good thing, was Denzel's name. Because I don't think it's the one name I never heard called on the night, which is usually a pretty good thing as a corner. But they were fantastic all the way around. But I wasn't surprised by the way the defensive line played, because I felt like it was there. That Tennessee offensive line was ripe to be pushed around a little bit, and boy, were they.
The biggest stage probably of that game probably got an enormous number. I'm sure Michigan was always the biggest number, but Jeremiah, the stage that he did that in, you've heard more and more about how ridiculous he is from people kind of just catching on, and everybody knew he was good, but maybe not quite this good. And I want to play this for everybody that I just ran into right before you and I started.
Ahead of Jeremiah Smith is the number 1 pick in April's draft. If he's eligible, he's the number 1.
Not the number 1
pick.
Receiver, the number 1.
The number 1 overall pick, ahead of Travis Hunter, ahead of the quarterbacks. Jeremiah Smith's the number 1 pick. I think he's that gifted. You know how I can tell receivers have gone from one step to the next? It's when the ball's coming in, catching the ball. It's the smallest part of the equation for them. That means like there's a level of confidence, and you're starting to put everything together. And so I'm seeing a guy who's, whether it's in his route, setting up receivers, whether it's on the run, catching the ball, setting up that first step. I'm seeing a guy who's advancing already in his freshman year.
He moves like a much smaller receiver. You almost don't realize how big he is. And then you see the contested catches and you're like, and then you see like the power after the catch. I mean, physically, he's got every tool in the toolkit that you'd want to give a wide receiver.
He's starting to get it all, and it's coming together.
It's no surprise to either of us. We both put ourselves way out there with our predictions on JJ. I said he wasn't the next Ohio State first-round wide receiver. He was the next Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson. You were with me, and it's not this amazing, outrageous take, because it's just been so damned obvious that this is what this guy was going to be. But to see him actually achieve it, nonetheless, it's still staggering to watch week in and week out. It's just staggering. It's unbelievable. Last night or Saturday was the first time I got to see him play in person, and he's just a different looking dude out there, man. It's just different. I can't even believe that we got this guy for 2 more years, but he's now completed a full season. And I think that at this point, our question that we started off with, and it was 50-50, that we updated it was 75-25, is probably 90% to 10%. And that question was, Dylan and I went through this early on in the season. Who would you take, a freshman J.J. Smith on this team or senior Marvin Harrison Jr.? And that went from 50-50. Then we asked it again later in the season, 75-25. I bet it's 90-10 at this point. It's not no disrespect towards Marv. That dude's the best. He's the best.
I mean, that just really frames the absurdity of what Ohio State fans are enjoying, and certainly what the program's enjoying is, you just moved from arguably the best receiver in Ohio State history to the best receiver in Ohio State history. In my opinion, will be if he stays healthy. Obviously, that helps. Always, the one thing that can hamper any of those things. Listening to McShay talk about being the number 1 pick in the draft, like now, when I first came on your show the first time, and just in general because it was spring practice, and talking to everybody, and people were certainly excited about Jeremiah Smith, and the best. I was trying to find ways to articulate the fact that, like, just however good you think this guy is, he's better than that. Like once you get a chance to see him operate in person and see how big he is, for one, how well he moves at that size, and just how advanced he is in everything he does, he's better than what you think you are. So if you think you're excited now, just wait. And the only way I could articulate that was to say that, and I believe it then, I know it's true, that kid who arrived in Columbus in January, had he been allowed to play in the Cotton Bowl, a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier, whatever that was, he would have played in that game and played a lot for Ohio State. He would have, even if Marvin Harrison was, played in that game, like Jeremiah Smith would have been in that game, and he'd have seen a decent amount of snaps in that game with just a week or 2 of practice to say, like, hey, focus on these 3 or 4 things that you can do, get them down, and we're going to find a way to make that work in this game and be an asset for this game, because he was that ready from the day he stepped on campus at Ohio State. Some people, and I understood at the time, because again, you just hadn't really gotten a chance to see him and be up close to him and see just how physically imposing he was. But my immediate, since people love comps and comparisons, was like, I heard a lot of Julio Jones. Oh, it's back again. You good?
Go ahead.
I heard a lot of Julio Jones, and I was the mindset, like, you're not thinking big enough, literally and big.
That's it. He's better than Julio.
And the one I told everybody was Calvin Johnson, and people were like, what? Like, that's excessive. And like, yeah, well, we're going to find out. And again, today I've heard more and more of that. And I would challenge anybody to watch him and say, that's not Calvin Johnson. So maybe he's an inch or so smaller than Calvin Johnson, but
maybe 2. But I honestly think he's more of a cross between Calvin Johnson and Randy Moss.
That's fair as well. And
I think he's a mix of those 2, which I think is the best of both worlds, to be honest.
Sure. That would be fine as well. So yeah, I mean, it's just been remarkable to watch at every turn. The guy just seems to get better, and all I can say after I see him, make plays like he does again and again, especially in games, on the stage that he did on Saturday, was that he's the best in America. Shrug your shoulders and say he's the best in America at what he does. He might be the best in the player at what he does, regardless of position. But he's the best in America. And it's crazy that we're already just shrugging our shoulders and saying, yep, that's what he does. And like you said, we have 2 more years of this. And frankly, if there was ever a player that forced, legislation to remove this thing mandating that you play 3 years in college football before you can go to the draft, it would be Jeremiah Smith's case now, where, like, this guy, as McShay said, would be the first pick in the entire draft tomorrow, yet he has to play 2 more years, not 1 more year, 2 more years of college football. If there was ever something that would drive somebody to get involved and say, this can't happen, this is not right for this player, it would be Jeremiah Smith and what he's doing now and where he would be in the NFL if he were allowed to go do it. So,
man, I sure hope that doesn't happen, but you're right. You're right. No doubt. The Tennessee fellas came out with no shirts on, and I guess to show that it was dudes who could handle the cold. They weren't worried about it. What'd you think of that stunt?
I mean, it just doesn't make, and they're not the first ones to do something like this to,
Yeah.
to embrace the elements or to suggest that they're tough or it's not going to bother them. One, you don't play without shirts on in football, so it doesn't even make any sense. Like you're gonna have some kind of layer on when you play. So I don't even get it from that standpoint. Two, 5 minutes later, they were all covered. They all had shirts on to some degree, so it wasn't even like some lasting, sustaining thing. And three, nobody was saying that. Like at least I don't say nobody was saying, but I never thought that the cold could be an element, a factor in this game because you quite literally couldn't handle the cold. It's the fact that the ball is harder to hold on to. Every hit is a little bit harder to take because of your cold. It's those kind of things, not because you could quite literally manage to stay out in the elements in the cold. So it just made no sense in any way. It was kind of just a feckless show of, fake toughness that's worth nothing on the scoreboard. So, and I would say that I've seen this stunt pulled in other places, and I would say the same thing about that. This isn't anything Tennessee. It made no sense to me.
There's absolutely no way I would let my team do that if I was the coach anyway.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not going out there looking like a bunch of morons with their shirts off to try to be tough. And it looks even worse that you lost pulling that goofy stunt. But anyway, my man, we're both headed to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
I can't wait. We're definitely going to talk more about both our trip and what we think about the game later on as we get closer. Buddy, have a Merry Christmas. I appreciate you so much.
You as well. Thank you. I'm glad you had a great time. I heard that you got recognized a couple times in the horseshoe.
I did, dude. It was crazy.
Man, you're
It was
just
crazy.
you're having a hell of a week, man. From the shout out from Josh Pay to getting recognized in the horseshoe for your work. And all I kid with you, but in all seriousness, you deserve it. The stuff you're doing and the jumps you've made with the show. I guess I've told you before, it's been a joy to watch, and you deserve it. So congratulations, keep going. Happy to continue being a small part of it. But yeah, have a great holiday for all you out there listening. You guys have a wonderful holiday as well. Always appreciate you. And yeah, we'll get back at it later this week maybe and talk some Rose Bowl.
Thank you, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. See you.